Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 1, 2, 3 good brothers. Ha ha ha! Making his return to the monastery and his debut on GeekWatch, the man behind Blur Havoc, and the man who I cameoed in his Monsterverse video not too long ago with a whole lot of falling snow. Good brother Alistair.
Oh, hello. Yep. I didn't know that was my time to shine there.
No worries. And making his debut because we've been doing some expansion with the temple. Good brother Ferb.
Oh, nice to be here.
And
I'll try to contribute something here.
the effort is all I ask for from people. And of course, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
The Dari Enterprises would like to remind you that the Mecha Break beta test is playing right now. You can get a key through Twitch drops if you watched any of the Twitch streams of people playing Mecha Break. Play it. We need more people playing giant robot games because giant robot games are amazing. Also, just to prove that I have earned my title of the bane of the monk's fucking existence, he should check Art House.
Zan?
Yes, Monk?
Fuck you.
It's just a lovely picture of the chain gunners from Doom, everybody. You all know he loves the chain gunners.
Anyone who has played the Plutoni experiment knows my pain.
I have
I know.
played it.
Trust me.
I've played it.
Those,
I know.
those bastards get even worse in a mod like Brutal Doom.
Yeah, I'm aware.
They'll kill you like half a second.
Mm-hmm. I'm very aware of that setup, and well, these days it's not hard to make a difficult WAD. Anybody can more or less do it. I highlight the Plutoni experiment because, well, that was when we didn't have a massive modding scene yet, and
Oh yeah.
you had two guys who would later have a very, very well regarded history when it comes to a bunch of different games over the years. It's just that, and I appreciate the fact that they knew exactly what they were doing and had no sympathy. So I think one of the Casale brothers had said,
Yes.
if anyone plays Plutonia and Ultraviolence and then complains that it's too hard, I have no sympathy. Because they were making it for people who had already played Doom 2 a fair bit and wanted a new challenge. But we are not here to
That challenge we got.
we are not here to go into that. And I could go into a whole diatribe about bad game design and evil game design. No. So, I think we're all familiar, in one form or another, with the story of Icarus. The man who tried to reach heaven through making wings of feathers and wax. But got too close to the sun, the wax melted, and he was reminded very quickly that gravity is undefeated.
I would like to correct that just a bit. It was his father, Daedalus, that made the wings at his request.
Mm-hmm.
And Daedalus mourns his son every day afterwards. It's hell to him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, let's not forget that I believe Daedalus is also the one who made the Labyrinth of Minos.
Yep.
Same one, yes.
But the analogy has been used many times because, well, you look at a lot of Greek mythology and you see a lot of stories of people trying to do things they probably shouldn't. And the whole get too close to the sun, you end up getting burned or something like that has been present throughout. Usually as a lesson in the price of overambition. That is what instantly comes to mind when talking about today's subject matter, Zack Snyder. And I will admit this is going to gradually turn into a bit of a roasting, but Right now he's in a position where he's in the people love to hate kind of approach. I mean, it was kind of there for a good amount of time, but it's happened a lot more in the last couple of years. And for anyone thinking we're gonna be dedicating a huge amount of time talking about the whole Snyderverse shit, no, that would be way too easy of a subject matter. Mostly because, well, you've had months upon months of people talking about that, the whole restore the Snyder Cut bullshit and everything that entailed. I mean, we will be talking about Justice League, but that is for later. Also, any particular shows where he was the executive producer, but not the director or the writer, that stuff's gonna get skipped, largely because his hand was going to be limited. Like we talked about this before we went live, but ever since like the 70s, the primary creative voice in a work has been the director, not the producer. Also, for it sounded like there was some background conversation over there.
Oh, I'm sorry, relatives visiting.
Ah,
I'll mute for a while the phone.
no worries, man. But obviously, before 2004 with Dawn of the Dead, he was mostly doing music videos, and I know a lot of people get on the whole slow-mo thing, but I think that's where the concept started for him. But it's not like he was abusing it. He didn't really abuse the concept until 300. And I do think the issue with the slow motion thing gets a little bit exaggerated. And as far as also I see that Dragon brings up Harley Quinn. That Harley Quinn show was little more than a poor man's Venture Brothers, if I'm being honest. Plus it's another case of this whole trying to make Harley Quinn into DC's answer to Deadpool. It's not sticking, and it never will stick.
Yeah.
Well, I would actually like to say that it's not sticking, but Japan has surely made her into a crazy zany character, somewhat like Deadpool, but with her own flair. And Isekai Suicide Squad is everything I thought it would be and more. So fuck anybody who naysayed it. They need to suck my dick.
And you notice there weren't any DC writers working on that project. I think that says it all.
Yeah. Kind of speaks for itself.
No, you. Something like that is.
Does?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just agreeing. I was going to say that I can't stand DC's Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
The most forced thing.
And like I said, it's very clear that that over the last decade they've been trying to make her into their version of Deadpool, even breaking the fourth wall a few times. What I see out of it, and it's something that we may discuss at a later time. It is a case of people taking a popular character and not quite understanding what made them popular.
I think my favorite meme that has come from people making the comparisons is Deadpool and Harley meeting each other in a comic, and then talking about how they both love people that don't necessarily love them and whatever. And in the end, they decide to fuck, but only if Deadpool is dressed as Poison Ivy and Harley is dressed as Wolverine. But
Okay.
it's a fantastic meme, and I love it.
But obviously, the Dawn of the Dead remake that they did was a giant pool of meh.
Meh.
I mean, yeah. The low lighting, that was certainly a thing, though it's not. Though compared to other offenders, when it comes to being dark, it's not as I wouldn't say it's as bad. The only main thing I remember from Dawn of the Dead is that giant truck. Like it, and this was 2004, so there were a bunch of people trying to do remakes of horror classics from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
This was also the nadir of stuff like the Platinum Dunes projects. And Platinum Dunes is a production company run by Michael Bay, which says it all, really.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how much I pick on Michael Bay, I can never pick on him enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I got about 5 hours of me picking at him. Coming soon.
Yeah.
I think I haven't yet watched 5 minutes of the Ninja Turtles movie he made. I couldn't.
I outright refused to.
I only saw the second one.
Mm-hmm.
That one was that was one of those movies I just really didn't know what to say
Yes.
after I saw it.
For a few seconds I thought of watching, but I thought, okay, but I could instead replay the Super Nintendo game, so what's the point?
The Super Nintendo game's fantastic. I'm glad that there was a spiritual remake later on.
There's a fun game, which I think is even better.
Yeah. But like I knew it wasn't going to be good. I knew a Bay Turtles thing wasn't going to be good, so I just blacklisted it.
I think.
You know, the greatest insult is to be ignored. Kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
That was the approach I took. And for years I would have a running gag that the Bay Turtles movies were never made and they didn't exist.
The what?
And
Exactly.
here in Brazil, we have the expression that an old politician said long ago: "Speak ill, but speak ill of me." So even negative attention is attention.
Mm-hmm.
We need to deprive them of that.
Yeah.
But obviously with 300 that was the breakout, and some people for whatever reason got this idea in their head that was something that he had done himself. It was an adaptation of a Frank Miller work, and there's a whole episode that can be made about the ups and downs of Frank Miller's comic book career. But I think the reason 300 was able to somewhat work was largely due to the fact that you had Rodriguez, who could kind of reel him in a little bit. That, and he was one of 3 writers, Kurt Johnson and Michael B. Gordon. So some people are best when they're on a leash.
Yeah.
People need
Yeah, I
guidance
agree.
in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, a couple years later, we got Watchmen, which the fact that a Watchmen movie even existed is a miracle, given the numerous stop and starts when it came to trying to get that off the ground, including one script that almost came to be from, of all people, David Hayter. Yes, Solid Snake almost wrote a Watchmen
wild.
script.
But if I'm not mistaken, wasn't
That's
he
wild.
credited on like the screenplay or something? Like he was still kind of involved in some way, right?
That would be interesting.
It had more to do with the fact that he was a part of the process, but I don't think he was involved in the script that would become the 2009 movie.
Oh, so like a credit that basically says, "I recognize that you worked hard, but he had nothing to do with this."
Because by that point, his particular screenplay was dead in the water. The idea of doing a Watchmen movie had been something that was kicked around and then stopped at least twice for various reasons, and a lot of people viewed it as something that was unadaptable for I think at least a decade.
Who watches the Watchmen?
Dr. Manhattan Gear. Can't be.
But I know a lot of people, especially the comic purists, really do not like Watchmen. I thought it was fine for what it was doing. Some of the scenes got a little indulgent and felt like he was trying to do a music video again, because that's where he got his start. So old habits die hard, I suppose. But if there's if I know that one of the big things that some people got pissy about was the fact that the squid wasn't brought up, but instead the explosion in New York was blamed on Dr. Manhattan.
So slavishly, we've talked about slavish adaptation before and how it being slavish to source is not always a smart idea. Yes, in the original Watchmen comic, you have this literal deserted island of artists designing an alien beast that is basically just a giant squid that Ozymandias is going to use to unite the Earth against an existential threat. But that subplot was like little excerpts out of this giant trade paperback, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest here. These are little interludes between the huge story, and you're already confined because movies cannot be the length necessary to explore all of a comic book series. That's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going, oh, there's an alien threat, it's, oh, we already have the nuclear scare. We can use that instead. Especially since Dr. Manhattan can, quantum detonate things? He can sublimate things down to nothingness.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's when you're adapting something into a different medium, some changes are going to need to be made. And fortunately, I can there is one film I can always point to, actually two films I can point to, that are a prime example of what happens when you try and redo something or try and adapt something slavishly. Those are Gus Van Sant's remake of Psycho, which I think got a Golden Razzie that year. The one that had Vince Vaughn playing Norman Bates.
Yeah.
And the other is a film that has kind of been my whipping boy for years now, and that is The Road by Cormac MacArthur. Because the adaptation of it, I don't remember who directed the film, but Cormac MacArthur's book is a whole lot of atmosphere, a whole lot of mood-making stuff. That works perfectly fine as a book. But when you're trying to do that in a film where again time is your worst enemy, it creates problems, especially when you're trying to do that over 2 hours as opposed to like 30 minutes. Some adaptations don't need to be 2.5 hours. But because of that, when you're dealing with different mediums, there's certain concessions that you just have to make. It's nothing against the source material. It's just a reality of the situation. That's in that same vein. That's why I sympathize with some of the people who are mad about the changes when it comes to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings. But at the same time, I think some of the stuff that they argue gets a little bit unreasonable. And I certainly didn't agree with Christopher Tolkien on the matter.
I think the argument there, Monk, is people wanted to see whatever their favorite thing from a book was, and if it wasn't there, they didn't get it.
That's a classic inability to see the bigger picture, then.
Yeah.
Go
I mean,
figure.
I will say, when I went to when I was a fucking child still, when the first Peter Jackson movie came out, what year was that? Yeah, not literally a child, like near adulthood, I'm pretty sure. Fellowship of the Ring was what, 2001?
Yeah.
So yeah, teenager. I was a little disappointed there was no Tom Bombadil, but I understood why it wasn't there. I didn't get, like, butthurt over it.
Some people really got butthurt over it.
Well, that's on them, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. But I will say this: in the wake of HBO Watchmen, the 2009 movie looks a whole lot better in hindsight.
Yeah.
Dear God, was that thing schizophrenic as all hell. I mean, I suppose that, and I think when it came to HBO Watchmen, I think what really confused people is that instead of being a sequel to the movie, it's trying to be a sequel to the comic. Kind of.
Emphasis on kind of.
Kind of is stretching it there, Monk, just a little bit.
But I get it. But like, a show is horrible when you see barely any memes about it. I don't remember any from the Watchmen from HBO.
I think there may have been.
You're right.
He's
not wrong.
On one hand, yes. On the other hand, some things that are very bad get subject to internet memes, like, say, the Bee movie.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Monk, why? Why would you remind us of this travesty?
Because you had to bane me.
I never watched it.
I mean, it doesn't really bane me that much because the Bee movie is a bane to everyone.
Can't be as bad as Seth modding quests in Heroes of Might and Magic to read the entire script of that movie.
I remember that.
But
Oops.
And obviously a year later there was him directing Legend of the Guardians: The Owls of Ga'Hoole, which this was at the tail end of that arms race where everybody was trying to adapt any young adult novel that they could get their hands on. You know, because everybody was seeing the success that Harry Potter had done, and since that was wrapping up, they're like, let's try and make something like that.
Yeah.
And admittedly, Legend of the Guardians is, as far as the actual books, they're not terrible. It's just that they were drowning in a sea around that time. The other, of course, then 2011 we get Sucker Punch, which I remember Sucker Punch being very divisive. There were some people who really liked it, and there's some people who absolutely despised it. And then there's me.
I'm.
Oh, go ahead, Ferd.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say I'm in the middle about Sucker Punch.
Same here.
I don't think it's
I just
horrible,
don't
but it's nothing amazing.
I just don't remember it. I saw it, but I just don't remember what happened.
I remember
Sucker Punch?
Hot chicks and fights and in bad place, and that's it.
Yeah.
I remember Sucker Punch bits by bits because that's how they actually made that movie. It's disjointed. It's hectic because it's her falling
Totally.
into her delusions before going back to the fucking reality over and over again.
It probably didn't help that I think that same year Inception came out, which while not a comparable thing, since you're stepping into that whole blurred reality thing, the comparison's going to be made.
Yeah, and
And okay, I have to correct
Just
myself. Inception
ruin
came out in
destroys.
2010.
all right. It's still a easy movie to forget.
I will. The way I saw Sucker Punch. The vibe that I got was what obviously a protracted series of music videos / short films, but moreover, it felt like Snyder trying to do what Tarsem had been doing for years by that point. And if you haven't seen any of Tarsem's work, I do highly recommend it, especially The Fall. He's very good at having an understanding of the look of a film. I'm not going to dedicate an episode to talking about Tarsem because he's only done I think 5 movies over the past 20 years. But it is an interesting beast nonetheless. I think when it came to it, the look of elements of Sucker Punch has had far more of an impact than the actual story, which I think is the reason why I would see clips of it in music videos and the like for years on end.
So it sounds like people just liked it because it looked pretty.
Yeah, I think that's also the reason why it's better served seeing that in a theater than seeing it at home.
Yeah, there are a lot of movies that are like that, and then you have to ask yourself, was it really that good if seeing it on a bigger screen is necessary?
I got in some trouble because I said that about Clash of the Titans, the original Clash of the Titans.
People defend that movie.
Yeah, I've seen people say that that's Harryhausen's masterpiece. I'm like, no. Sinbad is his masterwork. Not to mention with Clash of the Titans, there were some bits that were weird, like the whole Medusa's blood hitting the ground and turning into scorpions.
Well, law of averages, so.
But, of course, then we start to get into the real shit when he got tapped to handle doing DC's many attempts to try and do their own cinematic universe, and how cursed that experience has been for them, because they never had a captain writing the ship. They had 3 of them. With Man of Steel back in 2013, which I remember saying if you let Snyder, at the time I said if you let Snyder use his visual styles, then it might be interesting. What I didn't know is that one of the executive producers who had a much more direct hand was David S. Goyer. And to a certain extent the Nolan brothers. David S. Goyer is not well liked, even if he did have a hand in the Blade movies. Snipes refuses to work with him ever again. He really does not like him. He's accused Goyer of being racist. Some Marvel fans really don't like him because of the comments he had about She-Hulk, claiming that She-Hulk looked like a porn star. Which raises several questions I would want to ask Goyer.
Yeah, I don't know how you see that, but I'm not going to kink shame.
I will. He probably exposed himself as a simp, and thus violating the 11th commandment of the temple. Remember, thou shalt not simp.
It's the 11th commandment of the monastery.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to simp for a woman that's at least attractive for real, not just anything.
But
don't simp for Big Red, for example.
But with Man of Steel, I've ranted about the whole Zod thing. In fact, that was part of my rant when I did my that whole consistency segment in the MonsterVerse video that Alistair put out not too long ago. Because you make a big deal about how the other Kryptonians couldn't have a hard time adapting to a large amount of yellow sunlight all at once and need a filter, and then Zod's just able to survive without his suit, no problem, after establishing it multiple times over, and using the line of "I trained my whole life," which is an ass pull if I ever heard one.
Yeah, because you train to fight your whole life, but you can't just adapt to a new environment instantly.
Especially since the way it was set up is that exposure to yellow sunlight all at once creates a sensory overload. Like they're getting so much sensory data all at once they can't handle it. Hence the need for a filter, and then all of a sudden, I trained to master my senses. Which, if that's the case, then what? Then why have us invest in this hard and fast rule that you establish? That's always been a pet peeve of mine when writers establish rules and then decide to conveniently break them or forget about them.
Yeah.
Well, writers should always have the option to break their rules, but it should be for a big damn reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or at least give a reason, Like, a lot of times, writers just break rules and they don't explain why they're breaking them.
Yeah. And sometimes
breaking because they feel like it.
Well, sometimes you can get the reason from context.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing is when you have an established rule set for your universe, whatever that rule set might be, breaking it too often means the rule set doesn't really mean much, and thus either there's a reason that the rule set doesn't mean much, and that could be a really nice plot hook. Why are the rules so easily broken? Well, let's go find out. Or you're just being really lazy and Deus Ex Machina anytime you fucking put yourself in a corner. It's one or the other.
90% of the time they're lazy.
Yeah, because I don't want to spoil it, but something happens at the end of Deadpool and Wolverine that just makes you go, what was the point of Multiverse of Madness?
Deadpool and Wolverine isn't supposed to be part of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it uses the rules and the world building of the MCU, like the rules that were established in Multiverse of Madness.
Well, no,
and then the fact that the TVA are in it,
Well, the way I have to put it here is that Deadpool is sort of an exception to most rules in the Marvel Universe, comic-wise and cinematic universe-wise, because of the fact that he knows the fourth wall exists and he can reach outside of it.
Oh no, I mean this has the thing I'm referencing has nothing to do with like Deadpool himself. It has something to do with like the world in terms of like, because it's connected to the MCU because of the TVA and all that. Like it breaks a rule it established in Multiverse of Madness. Because Deadpool, you know, I can accept Deadpool break rules, but you know, everyone else breaking rules is a bit different.
Yeah. But I'd say the other really infamous thing that came out of Man of Steel was the whole thing with Pa Kent, trying to defend him not saving someone.
Yeah, that the arguments I saw around that were heated.
I haven't seen Man of Steel since it came out in theaters. Remind me of the argument Pa Kent had with Clark.
I don't remember the
conversation.
I don't remember the specifics, but it was basically that he didn't need to save people, or that he shouldn't. And
Was it didn't or shouldn't? Because
Something
those are
like-
two different things.
I think Clark goes, so should I let them die? And Pa Kent goes, maybe. I think that's what
yeah,
the exchange was.
I'll give me a second. I'll look it up. You guys keep going.
and I understand that it was divisive. I think some people who were trying so hard to defend it were trying to defend it due to a kind of sunk cost fallacy. You know, because it had been so long since we had a Superman movie that seemed to be trying. I mean, yeah, we had Returns, but that was more of a ass kissing of Richard Donner. And it relied more on nostalgia. But I think the reason it didn't sit well with me is the fact that a good part of why Superman has the strong sense of morals that he develops is because of Ma and Pa Kent. And this is something that is reinforced plenty whenever they've shown up in like any of the animated universes.
The only reference I can see about the Pa Kent thing is Pa Kent told Clark not to save him, not to save Jonathan Kent, in order to continue to preserve his secret identity. People took that as extremely weird. And Riona has a statement. She said, "Superman is the morals the Kents taught him, even more than the powers. By making the Kents weird and paranoid, they failed the character at a conceptual level."
There's a whole video that could be made about how a lot of really bad writers only see, say, Superman or only see Batman, and they don't see Bruce Wayne or they don't see Clark Kent.
To be fair, Batman doesn't see Bruce Wayne either. Remember, he doesn't call himself Bruce Wayne in his head.
Yeah. Well, this is more of an issue. It's the point that I'm getting at is that they hyper focus on the character with powers kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not on any of the other aspects, and because of the fact that they're looking at a character in such a shallow form, the resulting writing that comes out of it is equally shallow. Garbage in, garbage out. And now I know some people would expect me to be aghast about Superman breaking Zod's neck in that story. It doesn't leave a I don't enjoy the fact that situation was put in, but I understand the result. Though truth be told, it's not exactly a good idea to put that kind of thing in when you're just trying to establish your character. But that whole no kill rule. Well, I'll get to that. I know it'd be tempting to cover 300 Rise of an Empire, but he only wrote that. He didn't direct it. And honestly, Rise of an Empire is slightly better than the original 300. I think because his bad habits didn't have a chance to show up. But then there was Batman v Superman, which was a special level of cursed. I suppose yes, there was the whole infamous Martha thing. The fact that for whatever reason, instead of this being Batman v Superman, this was also trying to throw in elements of the Dark Knight, as well as trying to throw in elements to tease a Justice League movie, which is something that DC and Warner have been trying to do on one form or another for decades. Even trying an infamous pilot of a Justice League TV series that had gotten leaked online years ago, and it's a good thing that pilot never came to fruition. It was not good. Just
I imagine.
Was it as bad as the Teen Titans stuff? Because I saw one episode only.
Well, the Justice League TV series was a pilot that wasn't picked up, much like the Wonder Woman TV series that never got from the 2000s that never got picked up.
Got it.
Riona says they should have been leaning on their strengths with the animated movies.
I have a
Absolutely.
feeling I know why that never happened, and it comes down to one word: pride. We have seen plenty of creatives in the Bay Area who, when they get their hands on an IP, they feel like they have to do their take on the concept, put their stamp on it.
Yeah, leave their mark on the industry.
Mm-hmm. And more often than not, they're leaving their mark is akin to leaving a urine sample on it. You contrast that with, say, what the attitude Peter Jackson had with Lord of the Rings, where he saw what he was doing as being granted stewardship. That's not exactly the wording, but paraphrase, that's what he was leaning into. And for me personally, there's a reason I keep bringing up Harv Bennett. When he stepped on to be producer for Star Trek II, he watched the entire original series as preparation. And a lot of times when people want to put their stamp on something, they don't study what came before in order to see what to do and what not to do. They just look at it and want to make their version of it. And the problem is, in doing so, they're more concerned with their part of it instead of the legacy of what they're being given stewardship of, if only temporarily. And since the animated series was brought up with that, there was a whole lot of studying the comics and seeing what characters they could crib notes from in one form or another. Although some claims were not as accurate. Like, I think one of the writers for Batman Year 2 claimed that the Phantasm from Mask of the Phantasm ripped off the Reaper concept that he had developed for Year 2. Because he saw one of those comics being used as a reference by one of the artists when he visited the studio. Even though even though Bruce Timm has denied this claim and said that the bigger inspiration was Mysterio. Which, if I'm being honest, is probably more accurate than saying that it ripped off the Reaper concept. But you look back at the development of certain characters. The animated series drew a lot more from, and even Batman Beyond drew a lot more from Spider-Man than a lot of people are willing to admit. But there's a part of me that wonders if instead of trying to do this whole Batman v Superman and then bringing in Wonder Woman and bringing in Doomsday and a very shitty Luthor, they really should have just said fuck it and just adapt The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, because I think their biggest issue is that they were trying to just rush it. They wanted to get to their Avengers without even planning it out, building it up. The reason why people were so excited to see Avengers was because of the build up and the teasing and the hype behind it. Like it's like coming out of nowhere and saying, "Hey, I got this new job." It's like, well, that's great and all, but I'm not too excited. But if I know that you worked hard and got all the training and stuff, it's like, yeah, now I'm extra excited because I know how hard you worked for that job.
That was something a lot of people pointed out, that they were only looking at the peak they were only looking at the peak of the mountain and not the path to climb up it.
Right.
Pretty much.
And because by the time we got the first Avengers movie, I think we had I'd say about 5 different Marvel movies by that point.
Yeah.
Around that, maybe more.
No, I have to correct myself. About 4.
No, I think it was 5. It was Iron Man 1 and 2, Captain America, Incredible Hulk, and Thor.
Mm-hmm. So you had a fair amount of build up, and you had a bunch of teases about the interconnectedness, the post credit scene and all that. It is a classic case of the tortoise and the hare. But trying to do elements of The Dark Knight Returns, trying to do elements of Doomsday, I'm pretty sure whole videos have been done about all the behind the scenes tumult, which there was a lot of. And trying to do all of that in one movie, you have a case of them rushing and them also trying to put way too much shit in a 5-pound bag. And
It's doomed to fail from the start. No pun intended.
Yeah. And I honestly do feel bad for Affleck in that situation, because he was already dealing with some shit in his personal life around that time, and this certainly didn't do him any favors. Which is a bit amusing because when it was announced that he was going to be playing Batman, everybody brought up his time with that disastrous Daredevil movie. Except even he hated that movie, for one, and 2. Around this time, Affleck was kind of reinventing himself as a director more than an actor. And then it's because I actually defended Affleck's appearance as Batman at first. Obviously, when the film came out, I was a little bit less willing to defend, but that's a whole other story. But one of the things that I remember a lot of people got on the film for was the whole thing on Snyder's stance about the no-kill rule. but his defense was about how he'd need, basically saying that it would be more interesting to have him kill. Had this idea that if he doesn't do it, then he's irrelevant, which is, I think, a masterclass in missing the point. And if anything, I'd say it's a case of somebody not understanding the whole hero part of superhero.
Well, there are heroes that have killed because it's been that or a worse fate.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in much older stories about heroes, killing was kind of the norm because killing your enemies is usually the only way they'll ever stop. I'm not even gonna lie there. But when it comes to these specific characters, yeah, there's a specific code they go towards. Each one of them, every one of them, not just Batman, but every one of the DC and Marvel superheroes that everybody's familiar with, they all have their own way of confronting their rogues galleries, and just as easily you can find heroes who are killers within the comic books, just because killing is necessary. I mean, if we, for example, I'm bringing this up because we've been hearing the talks about possibly bringing back Blade. Blade obviously had to kill his rogues gallery because if you don't kill a vampire, it's just going to cause more harm. That's in their nature. That's talked about as to even he has to fight that infernal nature of being part vampire himself.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Batman, there's actually been some exploration by a few writers as to why he has that no-kill rule so deeply entrenched. And I forget whether this was Injustice or something based slightly off of Injustice, but the same plot of Joker about to blow up Metropolis was about to happen, and Superman was about to kill the Joker. And Clark, before he does, Batman goes, "Clark, no." He's like, "What? You're going to let this guy?" He's like, and Batman walks up and snaps Joker's neck, and then turns himself in to go to prison. No, he actually walks up, arrests Joker, and in the car ride snaps his neck, I think. Something like that. And while he's in prison, Superman goes to visit him, walks through the wall in the visitor's room to give him a hug, and says, "We'll have a, we'll get together when you get out." He's like, "When do you get out?" He's like, like 15 years if I'm on good behavior. And and the whole thing there is he broke his no-kill rule and then immediately turned himself in. And even if they don't say it out loud, even if they don't, spell it out, they instead showed it. It shows that Batman holds the non-kill rule in order to prevent himself from becoming the things he fights. He does it to avoid the infamous or famous, depending on who you are, Nietzschean phrase, "Take care when fighting monsters, lest you become a monster yourself, and stare not long into the abyss, for the abyss stares back into you." Mm-hmm. Batman establishes this line where he says no further because it prevents him from becoming what he hates most.
And, well, you contrast, if we're going to be talking about the whole heroes who do kill, you contrast this whole thing with the Punisher, which the two of them have met, and the Punisher doesn't, and they do not like each other. And but when it comes to the Punisher, the rest of the superhero community has always had a bit of trepidation dealing with him. Because of the fact that that his approach could make a problem worse if left unchecked. Also, when it comes to that concept, there was already the perfect answer in the comics, and that was the Nightfall story, where the writers specifically said they wanted to ask and answer the question: is Batman too tame for the 90s? And then gave a Batman who killed in the form of Azrael. And that didn't last. It's like, you want one that kills, here you go. And people didn't like it. Which I think they knew was going to be the case. But
Probably.
this he had gone about how Snyder had, in that interview, Snyder had felt that people were too attached to some of these things that were canon, saying he is like, well it's canon, but is that a strong argument about why I shouldn't? And if he were in front of me and that was his response, my answer would have been yes. Because you're not.
It's not yours. You're just using it.
Yeah. Oh. Not to put too much of a pedestal, but Zan, I do feel like contrasting this with the approach we've taken with the FF Legend project.
Yeah. So we understand, first of all, that when it came to Final Fantasy, canon only really is established game to game. There is a shared set of themings and ideas, and even some recurrent characters and recurrent creatures like Moogles, Chocobos, etc., that all seem to be common to Final Fantasy as a franchise, but that other than that, Final Fantasy as a franchise is not established as one single core ideal of genre. And that's because what the core root of what Final Fantasy is experimentation and iteration. Every game has done stuff differently, either smaller changes or larger changes. And that's not just on mechanics, it's also on story, it's also on setting, it's also on visuals, it's also on music. It changes game to game, and that's its strength. We knew that we didn't want to have to be beholden to any one canon. We didn't want to have to be beholden to the canon of Final Fantasy V, or the canon of Final Fantasy VIII, or the canon of Final Fantasy XIII, or the canon of the MMOs. Because they all have their own canons. They all have their own series Bibles. They all have the things that have been established as to be true within that world and that universe. So instead, we took the feel of things, and the way that they feel to players, and the way that they feel to people who experience those games, and amalgamated them. We took the soul of Final Fantasy, the soul of what it is, and tried to make the best game that is setting agnostic as possible, simply so that you can make your own Final Fantasy without compromise.
And I know that Mara's bringing up that this is about Snyder's fuck-ups and not DC, but the thing is, the reason we're doing this is, one, my love of contrast, but two, it is to demonstrate that in my not so humble opinion, I think Snyder had a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes superheroes in general, and very much a misunderstanding of what draws people into the superhero universe of DC. And a major reason why I say this ties into something someone had said when contrasting Marvel and DC. Marvel creates characters, DC creates icons. in that interview he did with Rogan, he talked about how he has a more deconstructivist mindset, and if I'm being honest, I'm getting really, really sick of writers wanting to deconstruct works.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because in a lot of times, one, the deconstruction is coming from someone who thinks that they're too good for the room. And I know for some their hatred of deconstruction goes back to these more recent works. My hatred of this whole deconstruction narrative goes all the way back to enduring the Scream movies decades ago. There has not been a single movie in that franchise I have actually liked. And if anything, I consider that a case of taking the wrong lessons. But the reason I say that I don't think Snyder understands superheroes is because when you're doing that kind of when you're doing deconstruction, it's important to build something new. And I never got the vibe that he was interested in building something new whenever he was taking a deconstructivist attitude. Just more of wanting to do his thing instead of keeping to what was established. Which if you want to do your own thing, do your own thing. That's fine. But if you're adapting someone else's work or someone else's IP, carrying the spirit of that in some form is important. That's why we did the whole thing about the soul of FF with our project. That's why it is important to have that understanding. Like, can you honestly see Snyder reading any comic books?
I can also see him saying in his own head that he could do better, but that's a different story.
Or go ahead.
I will say that when it comes to Man of Steel, specifically, while there are a lot of people who say that what Jonathan and Martha were doing with Clark and the things they taught him fundamentally undercut the moral structure that Superman is supposed to have, there are some nice cases for why the parents were making those suggestions in the first place. And for example, the other part, I found the other part of the big argument people had issues with when teenage Clark saved the bus full of school children who were drowning. And Jonathan was like, that was a big risk. You would be under intense scrutiny if anybody had figured out who it was. Because let's be honest. If not only would it figure out some guy has superpowers, but how does he have superpowers? Well, he's clearly not human. He can't be human. He'd be studied, it'd be discovered he's not human, and then he'd be studied even more intensely. And that would be terrible for Clark as a person. It would be terrible for Superman as a person. It could cause his psyche to snap. It could cause Superman to become a villain. Let's be honest. So Jonathan was very concerned for the well-being of the boy that is his son. That is parental advice that parents would give. It's a good piece of parental advice that parents would give. And then when Martha later tells Clark that he doesn't owe the world anything, she's actually right. He doesn't owe Earth anything just because he landed there. But Clark still goes out and has his nice journey where he grows up just saving people around the world willy-nilly. So, yes, he doesn't owe the world anything, but he gave of himself to them freely. So his morals are still intact. Killing Zod makes sense because, okay, again, long time, remind me if I'm wrong here. I don't think that the Phantom Zone existed in the Fortress of Solitude in this Man of Steel series.
No, the Phantom Zone was never brought up.
Yeah. So there's no way to just imprison Zod forever. There's no way for Superman, for Clark, to go, okay, Zod, you are a terrible, horrible, no good, tyrannical dictator conqueror. But I don't want to kill you, so I'm going to throw you in this never-ending prison. So the choice was, do I allow this person who can destroy the world we are standing on, kill everyone and everyone dear to, kill everyone and everything dear to me, kill everyone and everything, continue to live, or do I save this world? That's the choice he's making at that moment.
Yeah.
Do I allow a world-ending threat to continue to exist, or do I save the world? And he saves the world. And yes, it sucks that he had to kill somebody to do it. Clark clearly is... I remember that scene. That's one of the scenes I actually very much remember from Man of Steel. He's extremely... It's a war within himself.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to do it. But he knows he has to. And he eventually does. He eventually does do that right thing. So... Snyder may miss the point on a lot of things with a lot of the stuff he does, especially recently. But he still gets some highlights right. And I think we do need to recognize that. Mm-hmm. Credit where credit is due.
Yeah. But with the big thing is that, as I said, he definitely needs somebody to put for the proverbial leash.
Rein him in.
Because of the fact that he is in his otherwise his leaning is more towards the look of a given work, which credit where credit is due, he is very good at that. But something to note is that a lot of time with something like Batman v Superman, and Man of Steel, he wasn't the writer, he was just the director. Obviously, I'm not going to be bringing the original Suicide Squad into this because he was just a producer. So that doesn't. The only thing he directed was a cameo scene with the Flash, so that doesn't really count for the purposes of us. In the case of Wonder Woman, he was only the story writer, along with Alan Heinberg and Jason Fuchs. Or Fuchs? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But... And truth be told, Wonder Woman was actually alright right up until the third act. And then we go with the whole big CGI monster that's always been a problem in so many productions in the 2010s. This is also the reason I'm not bringing Aquaman into this. And well, when it came to that DC universe, they were trying Aquaman and Wonder Woman were two of the better works, and he had barely anything to do with them. Can't imagine why those things would be related. He was a producer on Wonder Woman 84, which was not very good because you know how that thing was all about wishing on some sort of monkey's paw. I feel like that happened with the production. They wanted something more fun. Something that wasn't as serious, except you can swing that pendulum too far the other way. But then, of course, there's the whole thing with him doing Justice League. And I will give a bit of slack because of what happened with his daughter around the time of production. That was part of the reason why Whedon came in to try and fix things. I don't think he was the person who should have come in because it's an apples and oranges thing, but that's what ended up happening. And if I'm being honest, that project was going to be doomed because they're introducing a bunch of new concepts all at once again. I mean, trying to introduce and give an arc to say Cyborg, for instance, when he hasn't shown up at any point before this. We talked earlier about them seeing the peak without seeing the climb. That's very much the case, and even that long ass Snyder cut doesn't really fix the problem. And truth be told, I think the only reason we actually had the Snyder cut as it were was because of AT&T strong arming. Because the big reason why it's believed that a big reason why the original cut was held off on for so long was because it was done during a completely different regime, and the people who were in charge of things now, I think Walter Hamada was doing things around this time, after Jeff Johns had to bow out. They thought it would look bad if something from a previous regime ended up outshining their current work. That's been the belief among a lot of reporters on the matter. But trying to do instead of doing a, let me ask you this: if instead of trying to do a full-on Justice League movie, they just called it Trinity and had it focused on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, do you think that would have had a better chance?
Probably. I think it would have been fine.
Probably, yeah.
I don't think it would have been like Avengers Infinity War Endgame levels of like profit, but it would have did fine.
It would have been way less of a mess than what we got.
Yeah. The main reason I say that is because if with Avengers, regardless of how many other characters are added, the focus has always been on Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor as the three pillars. To reference New Japan a little bit, the Three Musketeers. But once again, you have a bunch. If there's anything to take away from a lot of the DC stuff, it's important to have one person for whom is captaining the ship and has a very clear vision. Because I look at this and I look at Batman v Superman and to a lesser extent Man of Steel. In all three cases, you had it where he wasn't truly the one clear vision. He was just one of a dozen people who all wanted to put some kind of input in.
Not all of that input good.
Pretty much. Am I saying that they should have used Starro for that instead of Darkseid? No. Because once again, you end up coming back to that same problem of the big CGI boss fight. There were a lot of films in the 2010s that did that a lot, and I'd say it's still a problem today, just not as much because, well, far less people are putting stuff out after the strikes.
Yep. Also, hello.
Hello. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah. Well,
Good.
welcome.
Hello. Yes.
Our winner of the Doku Challenge, making his debut in the monastery, good brother Drew.
Heyo, how's it going, everybody?
We are doing good. This is certainly the most populous we've had GeekWatch on in quite a while.
Yep.
But
Nice.
We had.
I really.
Go ahead.
You go.
I think I had said before I jumped on, the big reason I do think that using this around the time Justice League had come out in 2017 was a very weird point in time for DC as a whole, because this in the comics this was right around the time that they were trying to do the whole New 52 thing, trying to really hyper focus on Darkseid as the I was gonna say as their Thanos, but he kind of always has been in some form, especially since both were made by Jack Kirby. But just having a bunch of stuff that was trying to get thrown in instead of hyper focusing on one angle and sticking to it. Death by 1,000 cuts, as it were. And even the Snyder cut was never going to fix that.
Steppenwolf was cardboard, man. Ain't no getting around it.
Yeah, I do remember throwing myself for a loop when I was like, wait, that's one of your big bads? People are going to be making references to the band of the same name, and you just set yourself up for that.
I'm kind of in the weird position where this is going to sound kind of funny, but for some reason I really liked the Snyder cut version of Steppenwolf. I liked his design. I understand it is hot garbage, but it just tickles my lizard brain. I like the way it looks for some reason. Because like his Whedon cut design reminded me of like a Shrek character or something. I just didn't like it. Like, understand, I know it's a horrible, edgy design, but I love it for some reason. I don't know why.
Sometimes the monkey brain calls and is answered.
Riona responds, Steppenwolf sounds like a CNN contributor who was fired for touching the staff.
There's got to be room for like cult fan appreciation in the medium, though, right? Like, there's some justification.
My knowledge is a bit lacking. I wasn't aware of Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
I didn't know this character before the movie.
But whenever I hear that name, all I can think of is the rock band from the late '60s.
Yep.
Same.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people were thinking that.
Wasn't he named after the band? That's what I understood, but I could be wrong.
Let me see when he. Well, he first showed up in an issue of New Gods in 1972, and I could see. Supposedly, it's based on the steppe wolf, which is a type of wolf in Germany, but
Makes sense.
But so could the band. So even so, it's one of those things where it would have been better to not dip into that. And if I'm being honest, I remember let's not forget that it took quite a while before we even got Thanos showing up when it came to the MCU, and Darkseid is on that same level, trying to do him in this one movie that when you haven't built him up was a terrible idea. But the thing is, because of the fact that he was just the director, I'm not sure how much input he ended up having. It really feels like when it came to DC, he was just doing a studio film, essentially. You know what? After that, we had Army of the Dead, which I think everybody's more or less forgotten. Army of the Dead. The only thing people remember about that is Dave Bautista being in it.
I don't even remember that much.
Mm-hmm.
I just straight up didn't see it.
I don't.
That was very recent, right?
Certainly don't.
Yeah, that was 2021.
It was like the whole reveal was that it was actually a zombie movie or something like that, right?
Yeah, I guess. Um, he was also that same year he was the story writer for Army of Thieves, which I did not see. Um, and apparently that was meant to be a prequel of sorts to Army of the Dead, which I remember a lot of people really trying to push that movie to make it a thing, and it just did not work. Not too surprising. You try to push something too hard, and you end up with the opposite result. But then, of course, 2023 and 2024, we have the thing that when I saw this, I had said there is no coming back from this, and that is Rebel Moon, the film that was hyped to all hell as his Star Wars killer, the thing that he had every single thing working in his favor for. And all that it amounted to is a poor man's Seven Samurai, like that hasn't been done a dozen fucking times already. and the fact that it was a gross misunderstanding of space opera. I mean, the big reason I roll my eyes when it comes to the concept of a sci-fi take on the Seven Samurai is that's been done to death over the decades.
Yeah, wasn't there a Clone Wars episode that did the Seven Samurai?
Yeah. There's been that. There was the Samurai 7 anime back in the early 2000s. There was.
Well, I'm going to mention that.
There was the Hateful Eight. I think there was I think there was an attempt at a full-on Magnificent Seven remake at some point. Like, this concept has been well tread. And I will note on the tabletop side of things, I have a bit of a beef with Netflix tied to Rebel Moon because of how they kind of screwed over Evil Genius Games. But it was the reason why I said this was a case of never recover is with some of the past screw-ups. One could argue, it's an adaptation of an IP. Oh, he had a bunch of people who were dipping their hands into the pot, or something to that extent. But Netflix literally gave him the keys to the kingdom and tried to because they wanted to make a full-on franchise out of this as part of a multi-year movie deal with him. Now, granted, the first warning sign was the fact that they took the thing off of the theatrical release they had planned. But there was also the fact that large amounts of time with Rebel Moon are just spent introducing characters alike and then going right to something else. Like, it never sits with anything. Along with a whole other a lot of really, really bad understandings of writing. And part of the reason I said he will never recover from this kind of thing is the fact that what's the excuse now? Like, you were given literally everything you could ask for, and you botched it. And obviously it had a sequel afterwards, called The Scar Giver, which whoever thought of that name, I think that they should be brought out into the public square and shamed.
Shame.
The only shame that we're gonna experience with Rebel Moon is that I don't think it's getting a physical release, because I would love to hear the commentary. Like I would just love to hear like I haven't seen it, but I saw the scene of like some kind of like he was trying to like emulate like the assassination of like Caesar in that one scene, and I saw that scene. I just want to know, what was he thinking? Like, what was the logic behind that scene?
They also kind of screwed themselves over with this idea of a farming colony being threatened by a massive galactic empire like place. It's like, the question of why this one farming colony is so important is never answered. I mean, if at the very, and this is why I say misunderstanding, because you look at, say, the whole farmers with the original Seven Samurai story, it was just a band of bandits. Granted, it led to bigger things in that story, and I'm not and that's a whole other kettle of fish. But it wasn't like a it would have been much better to frame it as like space pirates hassling a village more than a legally distinct galactic empire. But I think the big reason why I had said that Netflix kind of screwed things up even further was there. In addition to a bunch of adaptations, including a comic book with somebody who is probably the most undeserving person to write any sort of comic book, there was actually plans on doing a TTRPG adaptation, and Evil Genius Games was going to be handling it. Then one Gen Con later, Netflix pulls out on the claim of revealing confidential info.
Dude.
Netflix had a representative at Gen Con at their booth that year. Which, it's like, if you didn't have your representative check this kind of shit, it would have been an easy fix. Just go, because some of the things that they were showing was like concept art that they were going to be using. There was rumors going about that Netflix was trying to get the series Bible that they had written, because apparently the script treatment that Snyder and his co-writers had handled was not very good.
Garbage. Say the right word, Monk. Garbage.
Yeah, and since a series Bible is often used as a reference point for future installments, supposedly they wanted to try and get that while cutting Evil Genius out of the deal. Now, keep in mind, I'm getting that info secondhand, so I don't know if that was the case or not. But the vibe I end up getting from that is perhaps Netflix had second thoughts on the matter. Because, well, I have heard rumors going about that Rebel Moon was based on a script for a Star Wars project that was rejected. I don't know if that's the case, but it definitely I could definitely see that. Just based on how the thing is trying to look, like it's trying to evoke Star Wars in all but name. So again,
it wouldn't be surprising.
And I think that's the worst thing you could do, because if you're putting that image in people's mind, then they're going to be asking the question, why am I watching this shit when I can just go watch the original trilogy? And that's the comparison that you really don't want to have, especially when one project is already out and the other one is a promise of being good rather than actually being good.
I think a lot of
This
this.
thing of, well, this this is going to be whatever killer, it doesn't work out. It's better to be an alternative to that or something similar. Oh, you might like this as well. But when you say, oh, this is whatever's killer, you're kind of dooming yourself from the start, maybe. Or your expectations get too high.
Mhm.
I was going to say, I think this is a lot of what we're talking about here is like symptomatic of the same problem of the major American media players not wanting to take creative risk and then really just wanting to stack the deck to pulp profit, right? Like,
I would say that when it comes to when it came to this particular thing, I think even Snyder had gone on some level that this was going to be his sci-fi epic, something that he had been building up to for a long amount of time. Essentially,
his golden baby.
yeah, getting high on your own supply. And in the process of doing that, you end up with a case where if you don't measure up to that, it's worse than if you said nothing.
Mm.
So as tempting as it would be to blame the way things were promoted or the like, at the end of the day, he is as much of a contributor to that expectation as anything else. So he's just as guilty when it doesn't work.
For sure.
And I'd say this is even more so if you're trying to do a trilogy. Because if one of the major chapters is bad, that's going to have a domino effect on what comes afterwards. And the Scargiver tried to I guess the way I can describe it as, well, we already tried being a poor man's Star Wars and that didn't work, so let's be a poor man's Dune. You know, sometime after Villeneuve's Dune had already come out. Which I know the purists have some issues with that movie, but I will take that.
I really liked it.
I liked it. I certainly liked it a lot more than both the Lynch version and the miniseries on Sci-Fi.
They got charm, though.
They have charm, though. It's this when it comes to adaptation, and we talked about this before you came on.
I was listening. It was great discussion. I was really thinking about. Sorry to hijack, but like, what is the role of the director or the creative voice? Like, where I feel like indulgences can be awesome, and indulgences happen more often than we think as consumers, but it really is obvious when an indulgence goes wrong. So if a bad indulgence is bad, it could also just be bad because the writing was just bad, or it got lost in the edit. Anyways, okay.
Yeah.
I picked my spot. There you go.
Yeah. It's as far as the question of the role of a director, I think it is to present the soul of that source material, the spirit of it, but not necessarily the letter.
Yes, with the stewardship, like Peter Jackson, I totally resound with that sentiment.
Like, if I had to use another example of this sort of spirit thing, I'd actually bring up Carl Urban's Dread. It is most definitely a different take. It is definitely not as cartoonish as the 2000 AD comics, but it does have that same motif of Mega City 1 is a fucking hellhole. And in fact, calling it a hellhole might be quaint.
Yeah.
and if and in the it's not trying to directly replicate any any of the particular stories in 2000 AD or the like, but it is replicating the core concept. Mega City 1's a fucking hellhole. The judges are one of the main things keeping it in check. It is just doing it in a less blatantly futuristic looking way and more akin to more akin to a Warzone kind of approach.
It's also a microcosm of the world of 2000 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the world of 2000 AD is a fucking hellhole. People live in the mega cities because it's a hellhole.
Well, because it's either that or the Cursed Earth, which is worse.
That's why I said that. But, your point is your point comparing the comics to the Carl Urban take, is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that he. I mean, I don't know if Urban was actually involved with the writing, but he is Judge Dredd in that movie, so it's clear that whoever adapted that story took the soul of what the 2080 comics are about and didn't, again, slavish adaptation can be bad in its own way, and it can get really bad. So it wasn't a slavish adaptation. It was an adaptation that captured the soul of 2080 comics of Judge Dredd, put it in a slightly darker, less, as you said, less cartoony way than the comics do, and still gave us that hero in a world against him motif. Because the judges, as much as the judges are really fucking cool, and people are like, oh yeah, judges are awesome, the actual, like, what happens in the Urban Judge Dredd movie is much more common than what we saw at, say, the beginning of the Stallone version of the Judge Dredd movie. The judges are beset on all sides. There just aren't enough of them.
There aren't enough of them, and there's no shortage of gangs and worse that would make Mega City an even worse place if left unchecked.
Exactly. And so they captured that soul, and they made it into a really cool microcosm of a microcosm. Because, like I said, the mega cities are already a microcosm of, well, the entire hellhole that is the 2080 world. And this is just a microcosm of that. Mm-hmm. And it's that type of adaptation, that type of respect for the source, is what we'd rather see from comic book adaptations or adaptations of anything in general. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Snyder can't get his nose out of his own asshole long enough to give that sort of respect is why he fails so often.
Yeah, in the case of I'd say he, as I hinted at before, he's very, very good at getting down the look, and I'd say much like J.J. Abrams, who we've also roasted, Drew. A few years ago, I called him the California roll of directors.
Nice.
Because in my experience, California roll is the most basic bitch kind of sushi.
Yeah, unless you're a really curious, middle schooler, then that's where you start. The California roll.
Mm-hmm. And in both cases, you have somebody who's very good at making a film look good, but in terms of presenting a story, whether it be through visual storytelling or through writing, that is not their strong suit. And a lot of and I contrast this with somebody like, say, Sam Lake, who we've talked about in the past, who knew he wasn't a very good writer, so actually took a few years studying writing to improve on his craft. but the the problem when you have somebody who's focused on the look is that, again, you have a lot of stuff where you have these scenes that are more distinct than others, but there's no connective tissue. A collection of scenes rather than a story. That was very much the case with Sucker Punch, and I'd say to a certain extent it's the case with Rebel Moon, because you have a bunch of scenes, but when it comes to the story, there's not a whole lot that really sticks out because so much attention is put on making these scenes look a certain way.
Like a music video.
Yeah. And I know it would be easy to say, well, that's the excuse, that he had a background in doing music videos before he did film. Except there have been other people who had the same origin story and didn't have that problem. The guy who directed Dark City, he got to start doing music videos, but it's not like he tried to carry that over into his directing style. Or rather try to carry that over into how he wrote things, how he presented the ideas he wanted to work with. And especially since he had a strong background in terms of his inspirations, but with Snyder, a lot of that whole dark lighting and the slow-mo thing, a lot of that is getting the most from the least, which is perfectly fine when you're trying to do scenes that are meant to enhance a song, for instance, and you're having to get a lot from a little amount of time. But trying to do that repeatedly over the course of a film doesn't really work. And I know that that's not this. I'm not trying to give some implication that he has no talent. Apparently he's working on a TV series called Twilight of the Gods. So, depending on how that goes, and it's supposedly going to be coming out next month, we may end up adding Norse mythology to the things that he doesn't understand.
I think it's really interesting, right? Because it's really like the same problem of, like, as an indie creator, right? Like, I have to wear so many hats to get all the functions done to make a production. And I'm so, like, intimately involved with it. But that's, like, in my opinion, like, the new media, right? It's like the independent internet leveraging productions. But whereas with, like, the legacy sort of productions with the Hollywood culture that you're talking about, like, everybody ends up getting added on and the hats get taken off and you have to be specialized, and then it almost becomes like the same corporate double-edged sword where you have to delegate, hire this, send this over there, and then you have departments of everything. And then the more stars you get next to your title, the more unfamiliar you become with that, like, immersion. And I think it's really interesting too, because, like, this whole time we're talking about Zack Snyder, but, like, J.J. Abrams and all the other big guys, they've also put out a lot of mids in the past 15 years. You know, it's like the whole Star Wars reboot. It's just more of the same. And I hope that the traditional industry can break the power of these greed ghosts off of them so we can have some good AAA movies again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I do think that some of those habits are going to end up being shifted out just because of what's happened with the numerous strikes. We came very close to IATSE doing another strike, but that was avoided at the 11th hour.
Mm.
There's a part of me that wishes it wasn't, because I'd want to see even more chaos to laugh at, and in the process watch more people decide to set up their own studios outside of Hollywood.
Let's feast on the whale, man. Let's cut it up.
I've heard. I'm more of a. I may like fishing it from time to time, but I don't think I'd ever do whale fishing. Now, as far as hunting them a la Moby Dick, I'd probably do that, just not as obsessively, because, well, we know how that story ends.
Not to mention the whale is the right color for you.
Fuck off. But when it comes to I think one of the big questions is, with Snyder, we're dealing with someone who is a very polarizing figure, and instead of whether or not I fall on one side or the other, the question of why he became such a polarizing figure I find far more interesting. If I had to guess, and obviously I'm not a psychologist, and I never will claim to be, I think the divisiveness comes from this idea that in interviews and the like, he acts like he's this auteur. Not in the sense of he's making high art, but in the sense of thinking that he's above it. It's hard. It's
very
hard
Hollywood.
Yeah, and the problem is the output doesn't match the words. It's, writing checks with your mouth that your ass can't cash.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and unfortunately for some, because of either sunk cost fallacy or something else, they have it in their head that no, he's perfectly fine. He's great and all of that. There's been hard attempts to try and make guys like Snyder or guys like Abrams into the next generation equivalent of the movie brats. Like there was a massive push some years back to try and say that J.J. Abrams would be the next generation's Spielberg.
Yes.
Someone said that?
Oh, it got
probably because of Super 8.
That's part of the history.
And I freaking love Super 8.
I have seen that kind of I would see that kind of thing get thrown about, and yes, it is ridiculous to say that thing, but the point that I'm getting at is, when you put someone on that much of a pedestal and they don't deliver, it's worse than if you didn't put them on a pedestal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I put people on pedestals.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. And I contrast that with say, as much as divisive as he can be at times, I look at someone like Tarantino and like, all right, you actually earned that particular spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you put your name at the front of a movie poster, then
it means something.
Mm-hmm. Because there is some degree of a consistent voice.
I'd say on the polar opposite end of that is someone like Michael Bay, who he knows he's a meme, so he doesn't really, you never really see him taking himself too seriously, Like when he did that commercial where like he really leaned in on the fact that he's a guy that likes explosions.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Zack Snyder would just be a little bit more humble, I think people would probably not look at him as divisively as they do now.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that when it comes to Michael Bay, people like to make fun of he's the guy with all the explosions. And then I go ahead and I just point to probably one of his best movies, story-wise and action scene-wise, that has the least amount of explosions in a Bay movie, I swear to God. I point at The Rock, and I go, Nick Cage and Sean Connery made magic with this movie. What are you on?
I'd
And I
also
think it's because Michael Bay is also one of those directors where, like, the less he has a say in the writing, the better the movie ends up being.
He's a good director. He's a fantastic director.
Yeah, like he knows how to line up a shot and everything, but don't let him touch the script.
yeah, because of the effect of the new Hollywood, there's been this romanticism to director writers, much like the artist writer problem that happened in comic books in the 90s, and some people just aren't built for that.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely a cultural thing too, because like in Japan, the mangaka they do it all, and that's just like their culture, and they understand that they got to be the best, and they actually do their homework.
Yes.
Like the musicians in Japan, the rock musicians, they know music theory, but the American kids don't, and I think the same thing is true with virtuoso directors, like we're saying.
There could be
Yes.
a whole episode
Like the lady who made the music for. What? Sorry.
There could be a whole episode dedicated to that virtuosity thing, and I think it ultimately comes down to understanding that you're not bigger than the medium you're working in.
For sure.
Especially since with that comparison you make, since you brought up the whole thing with mangaka, in a lot of even in a lot of those cases, you're still working with assistants. You're still working with people who are, for one reason or another, might yank your leash on a few things. There's been a few stories about Toriyama being at war with his editors and assistants for certain ideas, especially during like the Cell and Boo sagas.
Yeah, like Hideaki Anno, he's got his dude, and then that dude went on to make all the other stuff. What was the other stuff? What is the dude's name?
Imaishi?
He's wider. His head looks like a rectangle, like a wide rectangle.
I don't know who you're referencing then.
He's kind of a heavier set guy.
Do you have
What
the
did he
slightest
make?
idea how little that narrows it down?
Narrow it down by what he's made.
I'm trying to remember. Shoot. No, he just did the live action Cowboy Bebop. He's been doing the Netflix. That guy.
Wait. Okay, no. Okay. The live action Cowboy Bebop was not. They didn't listen to him at all. Did you know that?
I'm sure.
And who you're talking about is Shinichiro Watanabe.
Yeah.
And
There we
also-
go.
He has no relationship with Anno, so I don't know
Yeah.
where you got that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably thinking of the wrong Netflix adaptation, but I know that Hideaki Anno's dude with the rectangle head, I respect this man very much. He did one of them. I'm trying to remember.
He did a
I'll be right back.
Netflix adaptation of something.
Oh, he did one of the big ones, yeah. Oh, I think it was Attack on Titan. Yeah.
I just... This is everywhere.
I apologize. Shinji Higuchi. That's who it is. That's who I'm talking about. Yep.
It's
Shinji Higuchi?
Correct.
Okay. So...
Shin- Ultraman, Attack on Titan, and he's worked on NGE, obviously.
I mean, he's worked on NGE as an assistant. Sure.
though
Yes.
the key thing is understanding the whole stewardship thing. When it comes, that's the reason why when it comes to going from manga and going to anime, there's very little in the way of differences, and the differences that are there aren't made as much of a deal, relatively speaking. Uh, because of the fact that there's the understanding that one sells the other.
I
And
figure the teams, they have more interaction. Am I wrong?
there's a lot of variance on that, and in some cases you're adapting something that's already that's not fully finished. So
Yes.
the it's
Send them to this island, you guys.
there's a whole lot of X factors in regard to that, as there isn't any sort of production. But the key thing that I think is important to highlight is, I think if Snyder were to have any hope of trying to recover from Rebel Moon after that trilogy is finished, because I guarantee once the third movie in that thing is done, it's gonna get memory hold so fucking hard.
For sure. I've already memory hold this.
I know that Netflix pretty much killed off any notions of trying to make it into a merchandise franchise like they did, like what happened with Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, in my Walmart there was like the shelves in the clearance area were lined with Rebel Moon toys.
You know, shelf warming so bad you need to wear gloves, otherwise you're gonna get burned hands.
Yeah, it was like I think it's the main character, that girl that wears the tank top and looks sweaty all the time. Like there were like double-digit copies of her toy. It was bad.
You've probably seen the Ollie's visits that World Class Bullshitters does on occasion when it comes to roasting Disney.
Oh yeah.
Like all of these Star Wars and Marvel Phase 4 toys that are shelf warming in Ollie's, which, for those unaware, Ollie's
Yes.
is the ultimate clearance area. It's where your toy line goes to fucking die.
Yeah. It's like the ET like landfill of toys.
Mm-hmm. And well, there's a lot of stuff from Hasbro over there, but that's a whole other story. But if there's to be any recovery from something like Rebel Moon, it would require taking the humility pill, and I'm not entirely sure if he'd be willing to do that, even with the amount of philanthropy that Snyder's been doing over the last few years. Like, maybe just focus on that for a few years and just not direct anything. Maybe he'd be able to make some kind of recovery, because everybody likes the fallen hero coming back as a story arc.
Correct.
Well, I don't know if he'd ever do that, since I really do think that the Snyder Cut like campaign really gave like a boost to his ego. You know? Like it kind of gave him the wrong message of like people wanted him, when it's like, no, we just felt like you got done dirty. We didn't really think you were like an idol or anything. Just like, geez, calm down, dude.
Would you say?
But ever since,
would you say that when Rebel Moon came out, that pretty much showed the man behind the curtain, in a way?
oh yeah, definitely.
When you say
when
that
came
there,
out, like,
Mildra, do you mean like how he appeared in like media cameos and like he was like, yeah, I'm the best, or you just mean the quality of the work in Rebel Moon?
I mean in terms of the quality of the work, because
Okay.
oh, I thought you meant the former. That's what I was referring to.
yeah. Sorry for the confusion, but what I was getting at is that there was a degree of propping him up during the whole Restore the Snyder Cut thing, and to a certain extent I could see how that could get in his head, but it also presented the idea of, with this sci-fi project, I'm not going to have any of those issues that held me back beforehand. And a lot of people are like, this is going to be great, and they had this idea of how good it was going to be in their head, that unfortunately reality didn't match up to that.
Oh yeah, I see that too.
Mm-hmm. And To call back to it, that's why I said there's no recovering from this. This is akin to how Star Trek Voyager had everything handed to it on a silver platter and it didn't work. Yes, I consider Star Trek Voyager a failure. It's not like I haven't roasted that series every chance I get. Oh.
I think there's something to be said about like the artist's hunger as well as creating with limits and how important limits are to a production.
Yeah. A lot of the reasons why a good amount of comics in the 90s ended up as bad as they did was because you had a lot of artist writers who had the limits taken off.
Yeah.
True.
That was a big problem.
Because I've always had a
Much
firm
noise.
belief that creativity doesn't come from breaking the rules. Creativity comes from enforcing the rules, putting limits on yourself.
I can't remember.
Because then it causes you to create solutions. It causes you to create solutions for problems that would kneecap anybody that doesn't have the brain power.
It really depends, though. You can have just as easily a wide amount of creativity in a sandbox as you can in a theme park. So it really depends on the skills of the person creating.
I don't remember who said it, but there's a quote that I feel is apropos. You need to understand the rules before you can break them.
Yes.
True.
Or in some.
But Zack definitely understands the rules because that's like part of his style. His whole bit was like, I'm just gonna make the comic book on the film, and he stick to it so good. But it's like a slave.
One thing that was really weird was that, like, out of all the adaptations and stories that he did, like, Watchmen was the only one that he said, I'm going to make this as faithful as possible. And I think it was solely because Alan Moore really did not like the idea of his stuff getting adapted. So the only reason Zack Snyder was so adamant about being accurate was just to spite Alan Moore.
And in a roundabout way, I think when it came to certain aspects, Snyder understood Watchmen more than Moore did. But then again, if I'm being honest, on some levels, Moore was a fucking idiot. Especially with the whole you're not supposed to be rooting for Rorschach.
No, sorry, Rorschach was cool.
Like,
Rorschach was cool. I'm sorry.
If he didn't want people to root for Rorschach, then you shouldn't have made him an underdog.
Well, we all know Moore that is a. Let's not get too far into Alan Moore on all this. We all know Moore is so up his own ass. He might as well be a fucking
or
a donut at this point. Not even an Ouroboros. He's so far up his own ass. He's just
Moore's kind of a weird dude. I'm not gonna lie.
Not just kind of a weird dude. The dude's fucking insane. Like literally insane.
I'm just being nice. He's really weird.
Oh, I guess you're the good cop here then. Got it. but he was like, you're not supposed to sympathize with Rorschach. He's a bad person. He's everything wrong. It's like, except you made him do cool stuff, say cool shit, and get out of situations he honestly probably should not have been able to get out of, considering that, unlike all of the other friends on the Watchmen, he's really just a normal guy. A normal guy who's kind of psycho when it goes to fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't his only, gadget given to him by other people?
Yeah, it was a grapple gun.
Grapple gun,
that Night Owl had made for him.
Yeah, and so, but Moore, who says you're not supposed to sympathize with Rorschach, gives me the same energy as people who go, no, you're not supposed to like the the humans in Starship Troopers. It's fascism. It's like, bruh, are you stupid? I think you're a little stupid. You made it so cool and inviting that you failed. Yeah, we realize that you're trying to lampoon something, that you're trying to make a mockery and a caricature. Your mockery and caricature is more interesting and entertaining than the message you are trying to convey with it. Good fucking job.
Mhm.
And so, if that's what Snyder was trying to do with the Watchmen movie, that he wanted to spite the fuck out of Alan Moore, you know what? Cheers to Zack Snyder for that.
Devil given his due and all that.
Fucking cheers, dude. Put Moore in his place, because that man has sniffed his own farts for so long he thinks air smells foul.
But I'd say that's as strong of a coda as we're going to get when it comes to this particular topic. Now, with that said, we will not be doing GeekWatch next week because instead, Zan and I are going to be doing a stream going through the beta test for Mecha Break, and we have double checked. We can stream that. It's not going to cause any problems.
Well, they specifically said that with this beta, they want it streamed, they want it videoed, they want to get as many people hyped about it as possible.
Mm-hmm. Because we love giant robots.
How could you not?
Especially ones that allow us to replicate the Itano circus.
It's most of them in this game.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't tried out every mecha or anything.
Now that being said, we will be back with GeekWatch on the 18th. It is very likely I'm going to be doing a birthday stream on the 12th because, well, that's my birthday.
Happy birthday.
We usually tell him to take a fucking
Happy
day
birthday.
off, but the bastard doesn't want it this year.
I am technically taking a day off from my day job that day, but I know exactly what you mean by taking a day off. And Drew, he's not kidding. They have to bully me into taking a vacation.
This man does not take his vacations unless we force him, or his company tells him you have to use your PTO or it expires.
Mm-hmm.
I feel this in my bones.
Yeah. Now
today's supposed to be my day off.
Well, it technically is, but there will be a few. That does also mean that the Parliament of Geeks will not be until the 19th instead of the 12th. That being said, I am doing an interview at least on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It's just going to be a morning interview on Monday. Thursday and Friday, Zan and I are doing Valley of the Judged. Thursday we're covering the quick start for Espers, and Friday we're covering Kurai Jikan as part of our 3-in-1 rule.
Except it's 3 and 2 this time around.
Mostly because of timing. And our dear friend Jeremy double booking. But Saturday will be the session 0 for the Robotech campaign. Over on Cloister of the Dice. For those asking, we are not using the Palladium version. I will never run Palladium ever again. And while I am going to be doing the Mecha Break stream, there will be one more interview with a recurring guest that I've had in the temple. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.
心底。